how companies work in the age of AI is fundamentally different. If we're in a business where criminals are getting better every day, then we got to get better ourselves every day.
Welcome to Category Dominators, a new podcast series where we talk with some of the most talented founders in the cloud ecosystem. We're going to hear about their journeys, their struggles, their triumphs, all the learnings on their paths to greatness. And in this material, we hope to accelerate the successes of founders coming up behind all of these wonderful people we have the pleasure of talking with. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Evan Reiser, co-founder and CEO of Abnormal AI, formerly known as Abnormal Security. Abnormal is the preeminent name in security, using autonomous and behavioral AI to combat today's ever-evolving digital threats. On this episode, we cover Evan's entrepreneurial journey and Abnormal's origin story, along with Evan's personal story and journey, building around a customer-centric culture, longevity and mutual partnership in executive roles, and how AI is already reshaping the entire software industry, and how Software 2.0 companies will demolish their Software 1.0 competitors. Evan Reiser, good to see you.
Good to see you.
For our audience, this is the first podcast that we're calling Category Dominators. The purpose is very simple. It is about showcasing amazing founders who are building truly extraordinary companies, not just average companies, truly extraordinary companies, thumping competitors, building lasting businesses. The reason that I chose Evan Reiser is because I just think he's a standout, extraordinary entrepreneur and has become a close friend of mine. Today, the goal is simply to share your journey with other founders and really thinking about how do I construct a world-class company in a holistic way, and, sharing vignettes about how you did that and some of the things that you've gone through in your personal life.
I've made so many mistakes in my entrepreneurial career, right? If I can, if someone out there can learn from me and maybe not repeat some of the dumb things I did along the way, I'll feel much less guilty about wasting all that time and money I have in the past.
Good stuff. So introductions. Evan Reiser, founder and CEO of Abnormal Security, really the first AI native security company ever. It is now a multi-$100 million company. It is headed towards an IPO, has absurdly high margins and a dedicated customer base, a world-class leadership team and board, the best investors around. The company, in my view, will end up being one of the most successful security companies in modern history because of its core existential purpose, which goes way beyond email security. So what has happened with the story of Evan Reiser and his partner Sanjay is, in my mind, worth really diving deeply into. So Evan, do you mind if we start back just to early days? Like your upbringing, who are you?
Yeah. I don't know how much is like unique or distinct. I mean, maybe three things are maybe a bit unique. One is, I've always been like kind of a competitor. But I was never like super into sports, right? So my competition took the form of like board games, video games, anything you can kind of count up, weightlifting, like anything you can kind of count up and see how you're doing, right? Kind of, it's always driven me. That includes, earlier, all the cliches about, kids doing entrepreneurial things. I probably did them. I was the guy with the lemonade stand on the street. That's old Pixie Sticks and candy in second grade. At one point I was the number one seller of Girl Scout cookies in,
Just a born hustler.
Despite not being on the Girl Scouts. So I think a lot of my like early upbringing and just kind of where I spent my time had to do with, building and competing and kind of, playing games, but I've always been a builder and kind of a engineer at heart. And, that kind of naturally brought me into, entrepreneurship and, building software products.
You mentioned to me one time, you had a little bit of a moment of hardship. If you want to share a little bit about that moment where you're like, all of a sudden you're this hot entrepreneur and then things go sideways and then you've got to just go through the wilderness for a little bit. You mind sharing that story?
Yeah, well, there's actually two. I think I know the one you're referencing. One is, I've always been someone that like enjoys kind of figuring stuff out. I kind of prided myself on teaching myself things. Also growing up, I thought I was very smart. I went to like an average high school. I was able to get straight B's without doing any homework or reading any books or studying. And so, I kind of got conditioned as a kid to think I was like super smart. And then I went to, college, and it wasn't the top, it's not even a top college, but I went to a college. And it turns out, if you don't do your homework, you don't read the books, you don't attend class, and you stay up all night and play video games, you don't do super well in school. And so, I can't remember if I shared this with you, Andy, but so I actually failed out of school my first year. And my school had a rule where if you like fail a certain number of classes, a certain time period, it was like you're automatically expelled. And so, when you're 18, you don't quite understand the consequence of failing out of college. But I flew back home, and my parents knew. They didn't give me any crap for the first 18 hours. And then I remember I went to sleep the second night. My dad woke me up at like 5 a.m., right? And he was carrying a bucket of Yellow Pages. Some of your listeners won't know what the Yellow Pages are, right? But he's like, I'm like, well, what are you doing? He's like, you're getting a job today. I was like, I don't know how to get a job. He's like, I got a book right here. Start calling numbers, ask them if they're hiring. And when you have a list of 10 people hiring, I'm going to drive you around. You're going to stop by and get a job.
That's parenting.
Yeah. And so I ended up getting this minimum wage job at a frozen yogurt store, and I made $6.25 an hour. And it was kind of during the summer, and there's a bunch of cars going by. I remember I'd always, during my breaks, I'll kind of watch the cars. I'd be like, oh, now that I have a job, I wonder what kind of car I'm going to buy, right? And I got like my second or third paycheck, and I was like, wait a second, I'm only making like $200 a week. I'm like, I'm never going to buy a car, let alone move out of my parents' like basement. And so, that was a big wake up call for me. And so it's a longer story, but I applied back to school. I got back in. They said, hey, you can join, but if you have one semester under 3.0, you're out and we'll never let you back. And I knew I didn't really have the willpower to actually, not play video games all night. So I just would lock myself in the library every day after school and just study, did all the homework assignments. Ended up doing pretty well in school. And that was a big life lesson for me, because it just, at some point I thought you could just kind of coast by on smarts. And I realized like smarts are not good enough, right? You also have to work your ass off. And so that was a kind of a big wake up call for me, I think, just as a growing adult.
That's amazing. Was there a second one?
So the second one, Abnormal was my fourth startup. I had other startups in the past. Again, one thing I always pride myself on, teaching myself things. I taught myself how to program. I taught myself how to start a business, or I thought I did. The first couple companies I started were not super successful. Some were total failures. Some were small acquisitions. And this company called Telepart bought my startup. Telepart was about 30 people. My company was 7. And it was actually a email marketing tool, right? Kind of using behavioral modeling to email marketing. And they were a digital ads company. And it was about like 3 months in, and the CEO came to me and said, hey, so we have like 7 of our 37 employees working on this product that makes 1% of our money. It's kind of dumb. You should start working on like the main product. And I was like so insulted. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, why'd you even buy our company? Like, what's the point? And he was like, dude, like, I didn't realize you had such a big ego. And I was like, what are you talking about? F you. Right. And then like, for whatever reason, a couple like days later kind of hit me. I was like, oh my God, I'm so focused on like proving my startup acquisition was successful that like, I'm not even thinking about what's best for the business, the best of the company. And like, I don't think it was any personal skill. There's some luck, but like, there's something that clicked with me where I would just, there's a mentor I had that was really influential on me at the time. And like, that was a moment where I actually realized, okay, like, I'm kind of dumb. Like, I should really be listening and learning and not trying to like prove myself and teach myself. And now there's probably like a 3-month period after that where I was sincerely open-minded. And I was just like, look, I'm here anyway for the acquisition. I might as well learn as much as I can from these people. And I think I learned more in like that 3-month period than the 3 years of starting, my company by myself. And like, that was a big moment where I was like, oh my God, like, what have I been doing, right? Rather than just trying to like figure it out myself, there's all these smart people out there. Let's go take all their good ideas, but apply them, appropriately into our business. As you know, I pride myself on some of my professional network, and I try to take all the good ideas from the great people and try to take my spin on them. And I think a lot of kind of my personal success has been based on other people's ideas. But, I think if I hadn't built that humility and open-mindedness, like, obviously I wouldn't be here today. Wow.
That is the lesson I hope every founder that's listening to this podcast or watching it burns that into their brain. It's humility. It's like that Satya Nadella calls it the learn it all approach. And I love that phrase.
And one more thing, like a lot of people come to me, right? New entrepreneurs are like, oh, Evan, I want to like replicate your career. And I'm like, you want to replicate my career? I'm like, I basically wasted 10 years of my life trying to like prove things to myself and to other people and not really listening, learning. I'm like, I didn't learn that till I was like 30. Right. But maybe like my early 30s. I'm like, you should like try to learn that in like your early college years, right? As soon as possible, because my career is not the role model, right? You could do, you could do my 20-year career. Anyone could be able to do that in 10 years if they have that kind of learning mindset from day one, which I didn't. And, I always think about like, hey, if I learned that a little bit sooner, like how would my life be different and what else could I be doing and what impact could I have in the world? So, hopefully people will learn that lesson the easy way versus the hard way like I did.
All right, let's geek out a little bit on Abnormal. I'd love to hear where you and Greylock and Sanjay all got together and cooked this whole idea, because let's be honest, what the hell was everybody thinking about email security? Talk about going and saying, oh, let's go build a house in the worst neighborhood of the city. But look at the results. Like, what was that crazy idea that turned into an epic company?
It's a really strange story, and it's very unlike, it's very abnormal compared to the average, startup. So many people don't know this, but like my background is not in cybersecurity. I never worked at a cybersecurity company. I don't think I even worked on a cybersecurity project, right? Any point in my career. And, most of my career has been in behavioral ad targeting, behavioral modeling, basically building software to get you to click on ads, right? And, me and Simon did that at a bunch of different companies. When we, our last startup was acquired by Twitter, and it was their biggest acquisition. And part of our job once we got there was to help build a better ad targeting engine. And the kind of key around building great ad systems is you kind of suck up, there are some cliches right here. You suck up all this data about people, you create these behavioral models, you try to predict their behavior. If you show them this thing, do they click on it? Do they go buy the thing? And so, but it was actually very challenging to build those products, because if you wanted to, get really good data, you'd have to go to every different, retailer and connect in their like custom data. And so there's kind of two trends that like inspired the initial genesis. And sorry for making this a long story. One was, just the rise of enterprise software. And we're like, imagine if all the people we work with didn't have custom software. They were all using the same platform, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday. Then this would be easy, right? The API integrators once, and you can suck in the data for thousands of customers, right? And so, and this was, obviously all obvious in hindsight, but the rise of enterprise software was a big one because it standardized, what the data is and how to access it. And there was also APIs available to suck it in versus writing like custom FTP scripts. The second one, which is also incredibly obvious in hindsight, was just the rise of, AI capabilities. We've been working in machine learning for 15 years. And so there's things that, even we did at Twitter were like 8 years ago that took 5 people, which would have taken 50 people 15 years before. And so it was clear that the tools were getting better. It was clear that the compute was getting cheaper. And, just like if you just project those trends forward, it's like, hey, AI is going to do some crazy stuff in the future. So the idea for the company was actually not a product vision or even a market vision. It was actually a technology vision. And the idea was, if we could take some of the same technologies for behavioral ad targeting, and rather than create behavioral models of consumers, let's create behavioral models of employees inside companies, because that's where all the data is very standardized. And if we could track, and I know it sounds a little creepy, but like if you could track every click and every keystroke of every employee, over time as AI got better, then you could understand humans better than humans. And so that was the original kind of platform idea, was let's build a platform that can connect to all the IT systems and creates better behavioral models that can predict things about how the business works, the customers, the vendors, the suppliers, employees, better than any human can ever do that.
So you thought about behavioral engineering as a construct under which email was just a use case.
Well, actually not at first. We didn't know what the use case was. And so what we did before we even wrote a single line of code, and this took us, somewhere between 3 and 6 months, we talked with over 100 customers or 100 potential prospects. Some were CIOs, some were CISOs. And we said, hey, here's some of the trends with AI and enterprise software. Here's what we think is possible in the future, right? What do you think we could build on that platform? And specifically, what product could we come back to you with in 6 months that you would pay us $250,000 a year for? Or what's the minimum viable product that gets that threshold? And we picked that number because you got to hire like sales and marketing and engineers, which had to be substantial.
That's a pretty high ASP, especially in the time frame when you started Abnormal.
Yeah, and like the exact number doesn't matter, but you want to be big enough so that you get like a big idea, right? And so we literally created a giant spreadsheet, right, of every person and kind of what their feedback was and what the main use case was. And we asked them, hey, like, if you had, what would that product be? And everyone has some idea. And so like, there's some random stuff, HR optimization, supply chain optimization. But surprisingly at the time, like 80% were cybersecurity use cases, even from the CIOs. And out of those, the top 5 use cases were social engineering, phishing, fraud, kind of like SaaS security, and some like, I think it was like data loss prevention, right? Those are the ones where like, hey, like this behavioral approach is the right strategy for that. And the old way of kind of either constructing big policies or using these giant databases of threat intelligence, it's not going to work because there's more personalized attacks in the world. And so that was kind of the first clue that email was a good place to start. There's product market fit there. The incumbents were very far behind. But the real reason we chose email was not because it was a great starter business. There's two other things. One was, if we wanted to build this behavioral platform, email's the richest set of behavior, right? People listen to us all, they talk about stuff. Do they really know what we care about, what we value, and how we spend our time? No. But if they took every email and they pumped it through ChatGPT, they could have a pretty good view, right? So email is like the richest behavioral data set. And the other thing is we had way broader visions for that platform. We want to solve many more cybersecurity use cases. But the problem in 2018 was that when you said you did AI, it sounded like, science fiction, fantasy nonsense, right? And people laughed us out of meetings when we talked about this. So we need a product where we can take this new approach for using AI to detect attacks, opposed to threat intelligence, which is how, 99.9% of cybersecurity companies worked at the time. We have to prove that technology is capable of resolving an existing problem. And if we could do that with email, we can build up credibility and trust with our customers. That would pave the way for the next 10 products, 50 products, 100 products over the next decade or two. So that's kind of why we started with email.
But you went after a $1 billion incumbent. Microsoft's got product. You got all these other people, Mimecast. You had an incumbent base of people, and you were pretty confident from day one. They weren't going to be able to retrofit and figure out machine learning, figure out this data acquisition model to be able to compete with you successfully. It was still a risky endeavor because you knew that the TAM was kind of small. So you were thinking about a much bigger problem set from day one, solving a technical problem that you perceived, at least viscerally, was going to be a much bigger impact on a company's general use of employee data to figure out what their threat vectors would be. Is that right?
So kind of. Well, one is, email's not that small of a market. Right? It's like $5 billion a year spent on email, right? So how many first products out of a startup can sell into a $5 billion market, right? Very few.
Well, you and I know that $5 billion is a big TAM, but a lot of people have these perceptions, if it's at a $100 billion TAM, I won't go after it. You're like, well, got to start somewhere. And the TAM itself might grow, and it will grow. We know it's growing.
Yeah. And I think the mistake that honestly a lot of venture capitalists make, right, and entrepreneurs too, is it's like TAM on what period of time? Right? Because you want to start with some niche that's might be $1 million TAM, right? But then it goes into $1 billion and then 10 billion, 100 billion, maybe $1 trillion in the future, right? And so you got to think about the sequencing because you'll never get to the $1 trillion TAM unless you win the 100 billion and so forth. And so email, when we started with email, and people don't remember this about the company, for the first 3 years, we didn't stop phishing attacks, let alone claim to stop phishing attacks. We just focused on social engineering, right? At some point, we were so good at that. People said, well, can you do phishing and malware and spam? And it was okay. Outside of blocking emails, can you do security awareness training and all this other stuff surrounding email? So the TAM does, expand over time. And as I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but think about ServiceNow, right? ServiceNow, I think when they IPO'd, they said we have $1 billion TAM, right? IT ticketing is $1 billion. Now we're come up on 10 billion of revenue.
It was just a remedy, rip, and replace. And now it's worth what, 200 bill?
The other thing is our TAM is not really email, right? Email is just one of the ways that humans consume information, right? The bigger issue is, people what do you call it? People security, human security. That's going to be an increasingly big deal, right? If you look at the last 10 articles in the news, and we're recording in March 2025, but I almost guarantee this will be true every month going forward. Look at the top 10 biggest attacks. It's always someone did something wrong, right? It wasn't China hacked the satellite and Andy Price broke through the firewall. It's someone clicked on the wrong button or they typed in their password they shouldn't, right? So if you look at just the real attacks that happen in companies, there are people related. And email is one of the ways that a stranger to the internet can easily accessible to you, but people are inherently vulnerable and susceptible to deception. So that's one place, right? But there's lots of other places you can, protect humans. And then the bigger issue is actually not even really about protecting people. It's more about the way we do cybersecurity as a civilization is totally messed up, right? We use all these outdated data sets of attacks that happened last year. We have a bunch of humans in the middle of the loop, right? And so we can have all the perfect tools, right? But at the end of the day, in the future, obviously the attacks are going to be in and out and done in 1 second. So you could have the world's best security analyst that has Wikipedia loaded into his or her brain and all context of the organization, the people, the documents, every business process. But by the time that when their alert pops up, the attack's done. So it doesn't matter, right? So the way we solve cybersecurity as a civilization is fundamentally wrong. So if you think about just how much money do we spend globally on cybersecurity, it's between 1 or 2 trillion and 80% of that's on people. right? And like, it's not working, but we're losing the war on cybercrime. Every year, the chart keeps going up.
That's one of the many things I find fascinating about you. You keep talking about ServiceNow, and I love ServiceNow. It's a company I've been associated with for a long time. One of the main backers, as you know, is Doug Leone. He's a really interesting and colorful guy and brilliant person. And he told me a long time ago, he said, watch for the companies that fly out of formation like a duck. He's like, I don't want the other birds in the formation. I want the ones flying out of formation. So you and Sanjay viewed this landscape is fundamentally wrong. This giant $1.2 trillion industry we know as security, and you guys looked at it and said, just the wrong approach. That is what is so fascinating to me about Abnormal, because that is a wild duck, wild bird worldview. What's the role that Greylock played in you guys' early formation? How did you guys all get together? I'd love to hear that story.
Greylock invested in this, the company that Sanjay and I, sold to Twitter. So there's some relationships there, although we hadn't met, Ashim and Sam, who are now board members. But we got introduced kind of through that Greylock network. And, there's all the normal reasons why some of these VCs are good. They can introduce you to customers and give you feedback on marketing and financing and hiring executives and all that stuff. But for us, actually the thing that made them distinct and unique was, I think, kind of like their partnership mindset and their intellectual honesty. So one thing that people also don't like, when you think about a VC pitch, it's like the entrepreneur shows up with a pitch deck and the VC says yes or no. Ours didn't work like that at all. We went in and we said, look, we're going to spend multiple decades building something awesome. So if we start barking up the wrong tree, it's a waste of our lives. If you invest your money in the wrong thing, it's a waste of your money and your LP's money. And their LP's money is mostly nonprofits, right? So it's a bad waste of money. So and instead of saying that, hey, we're going to go build this thing, we said, let's do this. Let's partner with the four of us and let's keep arguing and debating about different ideas until we can't argue about why it's a dumb idea, right? And we spent, we worked with them for, I don't know, at least 100 hours, right? Probably over the course of 6 months. And we debated. And before we even, I think, you wrote our first line of code, we had probably a 300-page document with our 8-year financing strategy, product strategy, technology roadmap, organizational strategy, where we had all that, where we did over 100 customer calls, 300 pages of customer notes and feedback, right? We did that all before I actually pitched Greylock. So we really did incubate the idea, not just incubate the company. And it took us a long time to get on it. And we didn't, when we started it, we were like, we know this is the right thing, not just for phase 1, but for act 2, act 3, act 4. And we got a lot of things wrong in that plan. We underestimated some, overestimated others. But overall, if I showed you the spreadsheets we built in 2018, they're not they are different, but in aggregate, they're remarkably similar to the way things actually played out. So, I think, there's all the things Greylock does. They helped us recruit and find customers and get money, et cetera. But the real thing was the partnership, and their kind of mindset was the grand majority of money will be made by a small number of very successful companies. So rather than spending an hour with 100 companies, let's spend 100 hours with one company. And if it has the right ingredients, it's pointing in the right direction, that will be the majority of all the returns.
You know how I feel about this guy, Ashim and Sam. Special. But the way you guys went about cooking this idea up, it was a really interesting story to me. And I think other people should think about that too. It's less is more. It's let's just go very deep.
Some of this stuff is just so obvious. People don't think about it from first person critical thinking, but it's if you're going to spend 20 years building a great institution, maybe take a year and train and practice and get ready. Make sure you're pointing in the right direction before you waste a decade of your life. And this is very obvious to me because I didn't do that for my last 3 startups. Right. And so for this one, we're no, before we go invest our time and money and energy and our social capital and risk our personal lives, right? Let's really make sure we're headed in the right direction. It's a worthy cause. We're going to be passionate about it. It's going to have an impact. And so it's crazy, right? Whether it comes to starting a company or hiring an executive or building a product, people kind of think one step ahead, but these things are multi-year journeys and take a little bit of time to make sure you're pointing in the right direction before you hit the ignition on the rocket ship,
Let's talk a little bit about our early processes. You've talked about some of the success of Abnormal having to do with some of these geeky processes that they're back office and really esoteric. You mind describing a little bit of that thought process?
Yeah, I'm a little bit OCD, so just my style may not work for everyone, but there were some things we really wanted to be OCD about, right? One was, and you just, maybe to kind of frame this, 99, if you look through the business history textbooks, 99.99% of companies fall off. Why do they fall off? They lose touch with their investors, they lose touch with their employees, they lose touch with their customers, right? And so we're okay, let's not mess that up, right? So just on the latter point, we knew that the customers had to be the guiding light, right? We wanted to kind of start with customers when it came to our product, but also our culture. And so we were obsessed with like listening to customers. And so I actually hired my brother, right? He was one of the first people we hired, right? I know there's a lot of, you're not supposed to hire your family and stuff like that. But like I said, here's your job. Do everything that isn't related to product or sales. And then your job is every meeting I am in, you are writing down every single word like as it was said, right? You're the human transcriber. We didn't have AI to do that back then. We had to use our younger brothers. And so what we do is after every meeting, right, we would take an hour. So if there's a 30 meeting, we take an hour afterwards and we would all sit at a document and we would go through the transcript and we had a structured format. What were the takeaways? Where's their views on the problem statement of the world? Where's their views on like our solution? What are their views on like how we should better communicate? And so we would kind of like, you write like a 3-page document, right? That was very structured. And then we'd have a spreadsheet, which had every customer conversation, a link to the document. And then we would score the meeting. We'd score it in 2 dimensions. One was how much did we learn across those 5 different areas? And then how well did we perform, right? Did we communicate well? Did we prepare well? Did we ask provocative, insightful questions that uncovered insights, right? And so we kind of built into this both customer obsession, but also this kind of self-awareness, intellectual honesty. And we would take, in this kind of debrief meeting, the last 15 minutes, we'd say, what can we do better next time? And it wasn't beating us up, right? Although sometimes we screwed up. I would stumble and say things that were stupid or wrong, right? But we really focused on, hey, in a non-judgmental way, what can we do better for next one, right? And we did this for the first, 500 meetings, right? I have all the thousands of pages of documents, but that kind of just mindset. And it wasn't just for me improving, but for the first 20 employees, we wanted to be like, hey, our cultures, we are going to literally obsess over every word they say, why they said it, why they chose that adjective. And we're going to obsess on self-improvement, right? If we're in a business where criminals are getting better every day, then we got to get better ourselves every day, not just a company, not just as the product, but ourselves as professionals, right? And Ashim, right, who's the founding investor, he told me this on day one. He's like, part of your job is to outscale the company. So if the company outscales you, you're going to get fired. Like, obviously, right? And I've repeated that to most of our employees. I'm like, look, you need, like, if our company is growing at 100% year over year, you better be developing yourself 100% a year. And if not, you're going to get leveled, obviously, right? Like, and so I think when you set that expectation, right, and it's not like a threat, but it's a reality, right? It's a true thing. And I think we tried to build this culture of learning and culture of self-awareness, intellectual honesty, and do it in a really productive way, not trying to scare people, but like, guys, we're all here to like improve ourselves as our craft, right? Improve the product. And so I think that culture of learning, really early on, came from those early obsessive, customer conversations.
How have you thought about your own evolution and what are the practices you put in place to take Ashim's advice into practice and evolve yourself so you outscale abnormal?
Yeah. I mean, not to repeat myself, but like the first thing is to acknowledge like your job is to outscale a company, right? Actually, everyone should have that mindset in any organization. It doesn't matter if you're the janitor or the CEO or anywhere you're on the org chart, but like you should want, like, and if you're at a company where you don't think you can actually develop yourself at that rate, then you're at the wrong company, right? You're surrounded by the wrong people. But I think acknowledging that's really good because now it's like, okay, like that's my goal. Like part of my job is my own development. I think, I'm, as you may know, and certainly a lot of people abnormal know if they work close to me, I'm hypercritical, right, of everything we do. And I hold a really high bar. But if you're trying to build a long-term company or trying to maintain any sort of integrity or credibility as a CEO, you have to hold yourself to like at least that bar, right? Because if you're the founder of the company, right, why should anyone hold yourself to a higher bar you hold yourself, right?
Buck stops with you.
So I think that's like the second thing. So then, if I'm going to be very critical, try to hyper optimize every part of our company, then I got to do that for myself. And like, obviously, like, again, just these are common sense things, but like, why would you take critical feedback about how you can improve? The person giving that feedback is not improving themselves, right? So I think I knew that if people saw me develop and kind of improve my own craft, right now I'm basically being a role model, right? About kind of the behaviors I expect from them, right? The mindset as well as the actual, action. So I've tried to be very critical about myself. And I just don't talk about that very often because, I rarely talk about, here's all the things I'm screwing up, even though I go through that every week.
How do you look at yourself and keep chipping away and be self-critical and still maintain your confidence level where you got this, I got this vibe?
For you to build a great company, it's going to take multiple decades, right? If you want to have influence on that company as a CEO, you got to have people like trust you and respect you, right? And when you say things, they have to believe you mean what you say. If you make people read between the lines or if you spin stuff or bullshit people, like, it might work in the short term, but it doesn't work on the decade long, right? We've all worked that company with like the big talking, the talking head bozo. It's all corporate speak. And you're like, they don't believe anything they're saying. So like, if you end up being that person, you will lose all your ability to influence and manage the company, right? So that is a failure scenario. So I think then when it comes to like, how do you communicate confidence? You should be very authentic, right? And explain, what are you confident about? What are you not confident about? And separate those two things. Because you actually want people like, the best scenario is actually the entire company is confident of things that I'm confident about, assuming I'm correct, right? And they're freaked out by the things I'm freaked out about, right? I tell people like, I want you to worry about things I'm worried about. Either convince me why I shouldn't be worried or like, let's go do something about it. So I think it's kind of you obviously don't want to be overconfident where everything is perfect. It's obviously not, you'll never improve, but you can't be like everything is fucked up because it's not, right? There's lots of things that are going well. So you're just being really clear, like what's giving you confidence and what's causing you to lose sleep, and just telling people that directly and not exaggerating things so you're blown out of proportion, but also not minimizing things ever. I think it's really important for CEOs to build, and all leaders, right? Again, it doesn't matter for the CEO, you could be a junior IC right out of school. You can still be a leader. It's really important that people trust what you say and they take it at face value, and like you kind of give the appropriate confidence to things.
And as you're doing that, did you find yourself growing your own confidence naturally just by being yourself and staying on your game?
Yeah, I guess, well, let me maybe share like two maybe mistakes I made kind of just in dimension, kind of like, and what I learned from that. I think, there's pros and cons about not, try to create a cybersecurity business if you don't know anything about cybersecurity. Right. One thing is like, obviously you have huge knowledge gaps and experience gaps. And so really early on, I had this delusion that there's some magical people out there that had all the answers, right? And they knew how to appropriately apply those into your environment. And so I think some of the biggest mistakes I made in the first 3 years as CEO is I kind of assumed everyone else kind of knew better than me, right? Which is like reasonable. And obviously the extremes are bad. You don't want to assume you know nothing or you know everything, right? But I would say like, I was overly deferential to executives, board members, right? Customers. And after seeing like some pretty extreme scenarios where that didn't work, it kind of reminded me like, and this advice can be taken in the wrong direction, but like you should be appropriately confident in the beliefs you have, right? And if intuitively someone's recommending something that you feel like is directionally wrong, I don't think you should necessarily, you obviously shouldn't agree with it. You shouldn't immediately counter it, but it's worth kind of interrogating a little bit and prosecuting and say, okay, well, like that's not my instinct. Like let's argue about this until one of us can convince the other that we're wrong. But I was way too deferential, I think, in my early years. That was a mistake I made. And I guess it was some sort of lack of confidence in my own knowledge and expertise about, areas I don't know. And I think more broadly, I think as the companies become more successful, I feel more able to kind of like trust my instincts, right? And it's really hard because like you don't know how much you trust your instincts. Sometimes you're like your instincts and be like, well, I'm kind of an idiot. Like I probably should do what I think. But at some point it's like, well, and I've talked to, probably 2,000 security executives. So at some point, there's some like large language model in my brain that's being trained by these people. And my instincts, are kind of reflective of that. And so at some point you get enough experience where you do want to kind of trust, you do want to like, maybe be conscious of those instincts. I think you should blindly trust your instincts. You shouldn't blindly trust other people's advice. When those become kind of directionally opposite, like usually one person is wrong, or more likely like one person has context and the other person doesn't. So it's worth kind of investigating. So I've become more comfortable kind of trusting my instincts. And that's, I think, allowed me to be a little bit more controversial and in some cases more innovative, right, than, my past self.
So let's talk about hiring. What advice would you give early stage founders on hiring their first teams for go-to-market, product, engineering, whatever it is, and then mid-stage and late-stage? Are there just different ways you thought about the key hires at those phases of the company?
I don't have a great framework that kind of aligns to those, but maybe I'll slightly evade your question and give kind of like maybe 3 things I think are that I wish someone told me like 10 years ago. And like the first one, like I know I'm preaching to the choir here, right? But the first thing, this is just common sense stuff. You're trying to create a great company. It's going to take you a decade plus. So it's really valuable to have people that are around for a while, right? And there's lots of value in having people that are like, we have, a lot of our kind of founding team is still here, right? Still kicking butt. And they're probably more effective today and impactful today than they were in day one. So the first thing is like, you want to have a team where there's actually a good fit, and the good fit has to be mutual. You can have the best person in the world that's the perfect fit for our role. But if we're not the perfect fit for them, it's just a matter of time before we kind of break up. And if that breakup happens sooner, it's very costly from the time, the money, the change management.
So disruptive.
Yeah, it's just not worth it when you're playing the long game. So honestly, and probably and you know this, right? Because we work together, but like I spend a lot, like at least half my time testing out, are we a good fit for them? Right? And I make it super easy for people to opt out. It's like, this is what we're about. This is what to expect. If that's not what you want, right? Then like we're super bad. And I actually invest a lot of time helping people develop, even their own understanding what they want, what's best for them. I was talking to a potential executive this morning, right? And he's like, I'm thinking about starting a company in 4 years. So I'm not quite sure what I should do now. I was like, okay, forget abnormal. Let's just talk about what makes you most successful for 4 years and what are the conditions where you can do your training over those 4 years so you can kick ass. So I come to their side of the table right before I even pitch them, right? It's like, let's help you develop a framework, right? So you can and it's like selfishly good because you want them to join for the right reasons. But in that process, they turn out to be a good fit. From day one, you're showing like partnership.
It's a shared conviction. I mean, your hiring is so unorthodox in the best way. I've seen you go really, really deep. I mean, almost down a rabbit hole, like 100 miles deep with one person. You took that approach early, and now Kevin's been with you. We're talking about CRO, Kevin Moore, world-class person. He's been with you since what, 1 million?
I don't remember exactly, but I think it was sub 5 million.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about longevity here. And some of your early crew are still there, as you described. And you attribute that to this philosophy of, hey, we have to explore a mutual fit, just not whether or not you're a fit for us, has to be a fit for you. I think that's really interesting wisdom to share with people, because I just see a lot of founders going out there being, I'm only going to think about it through our lens, what works for us. And then they miss the fact that something on the other side of the table is actually a better fit for them because of their worldview that they're not even listening to or asking about.
The core of like hiring, especially for executives, like it's about partnership, right? It's not about like, if you focus on partnership, you're going to attract the right people and you're kind of going to reject them. Like the mercenaries will kind of weed themselves out, right? So, I mean, that's why like, I can't remember, between maybe I won't name the person, but we hired a very important executive in the last year. I think our second conversation was, let me tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't join Abnormal.
I remember very well. It was amazing. She loved it.
Yeah. And any recruiter would be like, what are you doing? Right. But it's, one, like it weeds out the wrong people. It sets the right expectation, but also you're communicating like, look, I'm not trying to sell you my position. I'm trying to make sure it's a good fit for both of us because I want to go the distance with you. And so like, I'm going to give you all my dirty laundry now. And I want you to know that I care about your success as additional to our success. Right. And I think it changed the whole tone of the conversation from a transactional, sale to a true partnership conversation.
Okay. So Evan, this is gold. That person who we will not name here is a very, very special, talented executive. Grew up in a world-class company, is now a critical core executive for you in your IPO plans. And that person, as you know, turned down some of the most legendary names in cloud to join you. And you actually had some really big time celebrity, other people that you could have had competing, but you said, you know what? I'm going to block them out. This is my person. And you took very, very big risks on that approach, mitigating that risk, as you know, having contingency plans, at least in your field of view. But I love the fact that you went after that person because you knew she was going to be singularly impactful for that function. Bravo. I just think that's so weird. And now, did somebody ever tell you to do it that way, or did you just...
I got some great coaching from my good friend, Andy Price.
I don't know, man. I think that you had this before. This was in your nature. Somehow we just came together and just...
For me, and it's like all like common sense things, right? If you're trying to build a great company, to take a decade, right? It's better to have one great executive there for 10 years than 10 executives 1 year each, right? What impact can anyone have in 1 year, right? And so if you're going to do that, you got to focus on long-term partnership, right? It also means like you got to take your time to make sure it's a good fit. The same way it took 6 months building the business plan before we wrote the first line of code, right? I mean, when we hired Mike, our president, I spent 50 hours interviewing him, right? It was a joke. He teased me about this relentlessly, right? In the process, right? We went super deep, but like, if you're going to go on a 10-year journey with someone that's like going to run a third of the business, what are you going to take a 3-hour conversation and hope it works out? It's ridiculous, right?
It's a flyby. People do flyby interviewing all the time. And then they wonder why these people blow out 3 months, 6 months, a year in. And then you have all this disruption because In your case, you orchestrated it where you kept your CRO, you bring in a president. Kevin's never been happier in his life.
He's kicking too.
No, I mean, they're crushing it. And so a lot of people throw their existing CRO under their bus and they go, oh, I need to go top you with some, in the case of Mike, he had been Mike DeCesar for the audiences who we're talking about, who's been a 2-time CEO, including a public company, and was a legendary go-to-market exec at places like Oracle and McAfee. You orchestrated the conviction for yourself, the conviction for him that he should go from being a CEO to being a president, which is extremely, let's just say, unorthodox thinking, but it turned out to be a home run for him. And as you know, he's very happy with that decision, I think, every single day. You're kind of a Simone Biles Olympic gymnast sticking a landing in that regard, because 95% of companies, maybe 99%, I don't know what the number is, it's got to be really high, blow that transition, where the person who built you to, whatever it was, $100 million, let's just say for argument's sake, nobody gives that person enough credit or the time to soak with the new person. And there's this bloody, wrenching, okay, the last person leaves, they take 50 people with them, it's really disruptive. The new person has to come in, quote unquote, clean up the mess. That marriage between Mike and Kevin is incredible. It's a deep partnership. That's extremely unique. What do you attribute that to?
I think this is the mistake that I made in the past, and I think I didn't make here, right? A lot of time, things are always broken, right? And I think sometimes people look at an individual executive or an IC and they say, here's what this person sucks at, therefore they're not great, right? And as you know, for any job, there's probably 10 responsibilities, 10 requirements, 10 boxes to check. There's no 10 out of 10 people, right? And so you get someone that has an 8 out of 10, which is pretty damn good at our business, right? And you're like, these fucking 2 things, they suck. And you get so focused on what you don't have, you forget what you do have, right? And so I think if you think about that less around the person, you think about more, okay, what are the capabilities we're missing in the organization, right? Because for Kevin Moore, right, he's like everyone else, he's got strengths and weaknesses. His strengths are off the charts. And you'd be an idiot to go fire someone like Kevin Moore and throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And so instead you think about, okay, well, what I did is I thought about, okay, where are we going? What are the net new things we need, right? We're going to have more products. We're going to have more integration between sales and marketing, upsell motion. We got to really, reinvent some of our core processes, right? How do I kind of surround, how do I kind of think about all the players on the team, what they can bring to the table? So rather than having one executive with A pluses, in the 10 slots, at the organizational level, I got someone who can deliver A plus capability, even if they're not the same person, right? And so if you look at kind of that team, right now, we're still learning and growing, and we're making a lot of mistakes still. We'll keep optimizing, but that team brings all the skills, right? I'm not a sports guy, so I don't have a good sports analogy here, but it's like you wouldn't hire the goalie in soccer as the best kicker, right? What you care about is hey, to win the soccer game, I need these 10 things. Who can I put on the field that bring all those 10 things that can work together so we can go, dominate the competition, right? You don't need, that one all-star. You don't want a team of all-stars. You want an all-star team.
Let's talk a little bit about when you think about board members or investors as a founder. On your journey, as you know, you're choosing from a bunch of different people that want to sit on your board or they want to invest in your company. What do you find most important? What do you value?
For board members, there's some hierarchy of needs. At the bottom of the hierarchy of needs, they can't mess with a company, right? There's some people that have their own agendas, right? They want to be on the board for them to put it on their resume, and they're going to go do things, right? And make, just cause trouble, right? So they have to care for the right reasons and do it for the right reason. We have a great board, right? And every board member's there to make the company successful, not to check a box in their resume or a notch on their belt, right? They're really there for the right reasons. I think the second thing is you want people that understand what the role of a board member is, what it is and what it isn't, right? It's not to be the CEO. It's to fire the CEO or hire the CEO, right? But it's not to go teach us how to run an HR process, right? Really their job is, to evaluate the CEO and make sure the CEO is not an idiot and the company is being governed in appropriate ways. And I think from the qualities, so many board meetings, right, are a total waste of time, right? If you look at the average board meeting of the average company, if people knew how wasteful it was, they would be terrified, right? So I think you need to have a board that's focused on the high leverage things, do we add this one feature to the product? If your board is talking about that, you've got way bigger issues than your product, right? You want the board thinking about what's going to move the market cap of the company by 10% over, 2 to 5 year, right? That's the conversation, right, that you should have. And I think it's really important to have a healthy board dynamic where, and I think the main thing there is around partnership and intellectual honesty. You want to have a board member be Evan, that thing you're talking about, it's a waste of our time. Why don't you just go figure that out? Let's go talk about the main thing. If they don't have the confidence and the trust and relationship and the, comfort to like say that in a board meeting, then there's something more fundamentally wrong about the broken about that culture. So having kind of true partners that care about the right thing and they all know their role and they're willing to debate and argue. I think people would be surprised. I knew how many arguments I've gotten with my board members.
They always seem to be constructive. You don't ever seem to be wanting to shoot at your feet or disrupt, as you said, disrupt the company. I've never seen or heard any of them be disruptive at all. It's more like, okay, let's just chip away.
It's because they're smart, right? It's a waste of time, right? Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter who, like, somebody's messed up. Who cares, like, how I screwed up or how they screwed up or how someone else screwed up? Like, what are we going to do about it? It doesn't even matter, right? That's what that's what is a good, productive, constructive conversation. And I think just like, really being clear on like roles and responsibilities, right? In a board, like what should the board be doing, what should they not be doing? That's very helpful. And I think one other thing, which I would say we're good at, but not great, is but like probably once or twice a year, I do a session with the board and it's not about the business. It's about the board. And we talk about what's working, what's not working, what can we do better? How are each of our roles evolving as board members, right? What does our CEO need to be differently, right? For me as the chair, what should I be doing differently? How can board members contribute this year versus last year? So this meta conversation about, hey, how do we up our game as a board, right? Like if you're not doing that with any team, how are you going to improve?
That's another gem for founders because I do see a lot of dysfunctional boards distracting the founder and the founder's like wasting all their time trying to reconcile the different opinions of the board and they're getting whipsawed here and there. So this comes back to, what do you think the role of a board is from a strategy perspective? Do you think they're there to expand your aperture or to narrow it? What strategic role does a board play, if at all?
I would say most boards, the boards are a net negative of the company. If they didn't do board meetings, the company would be more successful. That's probably the average board.
By the way, some of the best founders in your peer group, as you know, semi-openly say the same thing.
Yeah, they do.
And a lot of public company CEOs grouse about this a lot. I just talked to a guy earlier about a legendary company in tech. It's a household name in tech. The board ruined it. And we had the number one company in an industry is in freefall. And it got smoked by another player. But it's incredible because this household name thing just goes like this. Little upstart goes like this and is the most valuable company in NASDAQ now or in tech, maybe in history. And that divergence, where one company face plants and then one just becomes a rocket is a really interesting story about how a board will overthink things and be too involved and then choose the wrong CEO and just a comedy of errors to wreck a truly world-class franchise in a legendary company. It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah. Although I do think if you're the founder, CEO, chair, that's on you, right? Like you got to set the tone and the culture of the board meeting. So look inward first. So I would say 60% of boards, if you just looked at, public companies, software companies, late stage startups, 60% of them, honestly, they just didn't do the board meeting, the company would be better off, right? 30%, the board is probably neutral to somewhat helpful. But I think the best state actually is the board is actively contributing, right? So how should they contribute? I think the one thing I said is it's not on the tactical operations of the business. If the board's working on that, then the CEO is not doing their job, either personally or they've hired the wrong people or they can't figure out the gaps, right? So again, if you're chairman and CEO or chairwoman and CEO, look inward first, right? It's usually your fault, right? Not the board's fault or exec team's fault. It's almost always the founder's fault or the CEO or the chair. I think if you ask, and I literally do this every year, I ask our board members, what are your expectations for our relationship and our partnership? And what do you think a good CEO should be doing in the board, right? And if you ask board members, what they'll say is I have different experience, right? If you're a VC, you might see a lot of companies. If you're, on our board, we have a guy who's a, Fortune 50 CISO. He's got a different set of experience. Always board members will say my job is to bring input to you and I expect you to 100% consider it thoughtfully and intentionally and carefully. And I expect you to make your own decision. No, so that's kind of the role. So I think if you're a board member, it's your duty to bring input and information that's strategic and important for the CEO to consider. The CEO needs to consider that and needs to suspend all disbelief, even if they disagree, really understand where the person's coming from, fully process that context. And then the CEO, who's really the chief context collector, right? The CEO has to have the courage to do what they think is right, right? And I've had conversations on the board where I had one position. I wanted to go left. We argued with something. I was like, you know what? I think they're right. We're going to go the other direction. Right. I've had conversations where the board's pushed me to go one direction. I said, I hear you. I can repeat back your argument almost flawlessly. But despite all that, there's some other context I have. I'm going to go right. And I think just being explicit about that and communicating and setting that expectation up front, I think that's what most board members want and most what CEOs want. But they're so dysfunctional in the culture of the board, they can't even have that conversation, let alone be able to operate, execute with that mindset.
Well, I think when you see founders who have lack of conviction or their strength of conviction is not there, then founders, a lot of times they suffer from the VCs will start to smell blood. They'll start to sense weakness, almost like an animalistic safari situation where the lion all of a sudden senses that the other animal it wants to eat, the whatever.
Yeah, but that's also a symptom of like bad board culture, right? If you're a CEO and you're making everything look great for the board.
And then they'll prey on. Right.
Yeah, the first time you bring up one little issue, right? I mean, I always, one thing I do in my board meeting, I start off with just State of the Union. I say, hey, here's 3 things that give me confidence. 3 things that I think are kind of screwed up. Right. And like, and I tell people like how much they should worry. Right. And I even say, hey, things that are screwed up. Here's things that are like, I just want you to know that I know. You don't have to do anything. Right. Here's things where, it's going to resolve by itself. Here's things where like, I don't know. I actually need some help. We got to talk about it. Right. So I think just like you gotta have a culture where I think you're being honest and transparent. And it's the same thing. If you want to build a great institution, you got to have a board that's there for a while. You got to have trust and integrity that when you say things, you mean what you say. You don't mean other things. Right. Anytime the board's trying to read between the lines and kind of look for these cues, you've kind of like already lost at that point. Right. And so one thing for me personally, both with the board and with customers and with employees, I want to be someone where you don't have to read between the lines. If Evan thinks something, he's going to say it, right? And there's no like hidden message or little cue you have to like pick up on. I tell people don't extrapolate. And if I'm not clear, just let me know and I'll try to clarify. So I think that a lot of it comes down to like board culture. And if you're a founder, CEO, chairperson, like, that's on you to go set up. And if you don't see it, again, it's on you to go take action, right? Until that board member says, I understand, I refuse to do that, right? Then you haven't really fully done your job as the chair to kind of set up that culture. If you get to that point, right, then it should be obvious that there's not a good mutual fit and one of you two needs to be exiting the board.
So a lot of companies go sideways, as you know, because the founders, their dynamic goes sideways. And then there's this power struggle. Forget what the titles are. As you know, you and Sanjay, I've always thought of you guys as partners. But you're obviously very different and you think about things differently, you operate things differently. What do you attribute the long marriage and the high functioning relationship you have with Sanjay? What do you attribute that success to? Because I just do think that when you have that company I mentioned earlier, let's just be honest, I'm talking about NVIDIA, because it's still run by its founder. I mean, Jensen's a freak of nature. He was always been in command of that ship, even through the work's darkest days. He never really seemed to have a right-hand person like that, or let's say a co-partner that anybody else recognized. You have a really strong one. What do you attribute the success of you and Sanjay to?
It's kind of the same stuff. I'm sorry for being repetitive here, but it comes down to like partnership, like just partnership, right? What is true partnership, right? It's, again, being able to have frank conversations, being able to divide and conquer, being able to collaborate, really, so I think that's important. I would say one of the underlying things, like we both have a lot of mutual respect for each other. Like I don't mean to sound cocky or egotistical here, but like there's only a couple people in this world when they say, Evan, you're wrong, where I instantly say, okay, they're probably right. What do I not understand, right? Sanjay's one of those people, right? One of my board members, also one of those people where if they say me I'm wrong, like no matter what my level of confidence is, I'm like, okay, like I'm actually probably wrong. Let me figure out what I don't understand.
It's because you respect his intellectual honesty and self and depth.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things, right? One is I think he cares about the right things, right? I think he's we're optimizing for the same thing. I believe that. He wants me to be better. He wants himself better. He wants the company to be better. So if he's saying something like, I know what he's optimizing for. I don't have to second guess his intentions. The second thing is he's very intellectually honest and clear, right? He's also very perceptive and very thoughtful. And so he doesn't express strong opinions unless there's actual strong conviction behind it. If there's strong conviction, it's because he's seen things that I haven't seen, right? So, and I think the other thing, which I say is kind of a half joke, but I think it's true, although I've never talked about this with him, I think we both think the other person is smarter than us, right? And so like, it's a great dynamic, right? Like the best partnerships where like, there's partnerships in friendship and romance and business. If you feel like you're kind of getting a better deal for the person, right? Like, like I always think like Sanjay's a lot smarter than me, right? He contributes more than I do. He probably thinks the same about me. So it's like, we just both feel so like grateful to be in that partnership that, it makes all the other stuff kind of easier. And I think we've worked together for a long time. We know where should we collaborate, where to divide and conquer. I know if Sanjay's on it, he's going to do mostly what I would do. And if not, like, there's probably a good reason. So there's a lot of like trust there, kind of all the different dimensions of trust.
You use the word trust a ton in this call.
There's different dimensions of trust, right? One is like trust is like, is this person high integrity? Can I even literally, will they say things that they actually believe, right? Or that are actually true? Second is like, do you trust their intent, right? Do you trust that you have a shared objective? Right? Because you could think someone's an honest person, they're optimizing for something, they're being super Machiavellian, right? The other one is like, do I trust their capabilities, right? I may think Sanjay, I have lots of trust, but maybe like, I don't trust him to, build a workflow in Salesforce because I'm really the Salesforce admin and expert, right? So trust can be misused. I just think like anytime you talk about trust, you gotta be clarifying what do you mean by that? Because I mean, I've heard from, peers where, and executives where, someone said they don't trust me. And what was really intended was, Andy, I just don't think you're the expert teaching me how to garden. I don't trust your capabilities there. But they can interpret as like, they think I'm a dishonest person. And like, that's like an attack on my identity. So just trust is a little, you gotta be careful with trust and clarify it.
It's a weird one too, because you can also say, well, if you're overly trusting, then maybe you're naive, and then you're just making the wrong decision. You're just making bad decisions because you're overly trusting people. There's a knife edge there, no question.
But you can trust someone and not agree with their judgment, right? Like actually, you should never like just reflexively agree to someone's opinion. Like, Andy, I trust you like in all the ways I just described, right? But, if you told me, so like, there's some things you would tell me, I'd be like, well, I hear what you're saying. I want to learn more because I respect you, but like, I'm not instantly just going to go do it without, thinking about it, right? What kind of leader or manager would you be if you just like automatically reflexively did things without judgment?
Category domination. When you just think about the landscape of competitors, when you think about, I want to beat every other company that we're thinking that we see in the market, not just a little bit, but I want to gap them. I don't get the sense that you want to just win a few, skirmishes here and there. I feel like you want to win a much bigger prize. How do you think about that? Is it just one company, or is it category? Is it hearts and minds of customers? How do you describe that?
Yeah, I've kind of like two conflicting views, right? On one hand, I actually don't think much about competition, right? And there's a lot of rhetoric on, you got to study the competition. What are their products and their sales process? And like part of me is just like, I don't know, if we just build like cool, badass products, like people that customers value and care about, like it's all going to work out, right? It's not like, it's very rare. Like if you're really trying to like go beat someone, you're not gonna like, there's no like great ideas you're gonna come up with, right? You have to kind of think for yourselves, right? If you actually want to be unique and distinct, right? If you really want to be number one, you got to do things differently by definition, right? So I try to don't get like too oriented, like on what our competitors do.
You're staying on your own game. That's what you would pass on. Play your own game.
Yes. Yes. And I'm probably going to contradict myself in like 2 minutes, but I think it's an important concept. Like, don't overly rotate your competitors, right? There's always, if you're doing something interesting, there's going to be 1,000 competitors, right? I couldn't tell you who are the other big email security startups, right? Because when I'm just focused on like, let's just build cool shit for customers. And, honestly, by the time someone is copying our thing, like we'll be on the next thing. So instead of just focus on our ability to like innovate quickly and effectively and efficiently and make sure the things we build our customers care about, right? So, we have some big companies that we compete with that make a lot more money than we do. Like I always talk to them like, guys, I like in the long run, what's going to separate two companies? It's going to be the rate of innovation, right? If we're at a higher rate at some point, our product portfolio, if we listen to customers, will be better for customers. And if we do that better than them, they're going to fall behind. And like, let's just focus on that. That's what we can control. You can't change their strategy. And like, and also you can like overreact to like things that are very unnecessary, right? So your competitor launches one feature you don't have. You take your entire sales force to study that feature for a month, right? When instead they should be talking about the 10 things you do unique and better, right? So you can get like overly defensive and, end up focusing unintentionally on the wrong things.
Oh, I see so many companies hit the wall because they see something in the market from some random little competitor, and then they decide that's an existential threat. They go 100 miles deep into that one situation and miss the big picture entirely, and they get knocked off the perch. That's a really interesting way of thinking.
Yeah, like, do you think like Tesla is studying Ford's website and reading all Ford's press releases and like,
Pretty sure no.
no, right? They're like, hey, what would be a badass product to build for customers? And like, why can't we do it? Right? Okay, now the asterisk here is some ideas, there's reasons why no one's done them. And you should really think about those before you go innovate random. But you also have to be careful because like, all great inventions not thought of before, right? Or the technology wasn't around to kind of make it possible. So I just think you just gotta keep it balanced, right? I think too many people are err on the side of focusing too much on competition. Where at the end of the day, like, if you just focus on your customers and innovating, I don't know, it's all going to work out, right? Maybe you actually build your product in a different direction, right? It ends up being a totally different category. If you stay focused and responsive on what customers need, the customers will pull you in the right direction, especially enterprise software, where customers are like, please, I want to give you my money if you just solve my problem really well.
Slippin always said, the strategy is totally overrated. It's like cricket strategy. The market's changed too fast. This is literally a quote from the guy. And he says, the only thing you do is you identify customer pain, you sell into that customer pain. And it's all you ever do. That's your strategy. Your strategy unfolds as you keep selling into customer pain. And it's like people get so theoretical about things when that's at the end of the day, the business. That's what drives the business.
Yeah. And just the counter to that, and obviously like I respect Frank. He's a mentor of mine. But like you also have to think about like, are you kind of going down the right roads and are you barking up the right trees? What you don't want to do is end up in some market that you have no right to win in the long run, right? Now you've wasted your brand and your money and your time, your customer trust kind of going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, but your customer obsession posture matches his because by continuously selling into pain, you are super connected to the customer population. And you'll never veer off of that, which creates obviously new business opportunities. That was I think you guys have that in common, in other words.
I agree, but I do think it is important to think about like for the markets you're going into, whether existing or emerging, what right do you have to win, right? And if there's not an obvious one that's like natural there, then you need to fabricate that at some earlier stage in your strategy, right? The people that come to us and say, hey, why don't you guys just build an email client? You know all my behavior and everything I talk to and kind of what I say and how I say. Can you just build me like an AI email thing? And obviously we could, and that's a pain today. And we would have the best product today. But long term, obviously Microsoft will build a way better version. They're a productivity company. We're a security company. They should go build the AI productivity tools. We'll build the AI security tools. So that's one where it's like, customers can also pull you in the wrong direction and that they may have real pain. You may have real ability to solve it now, but like you got to have some belief, like in the 5-10 year version, what right do we have to win? And that also is very clarifying because now it becomes more clear. What are your real strategic assets? Right? The things that, give you more rights to like win and dominate those future markets, you better be developing them today on product 1. So product 10 can be, a category killer.
Oh man, I tell you what, this is unbelievably good material. Like you were the first person I wanted to do this podcast with, Evan. And I can't believe what I've personally just learned. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on to other founders as you see them come along? Because as you know, you and I both are cheering for a lot of these people and saying, hey, this is just good for society when we see giant companies created. What else would you leave them with?
The most important thing that trumps probably every other decision right now for companies in 2025 is this AI transformation. If you look at how a software company works today, it's pretty much identical to how a software company worked 30 years ago. Right? There's some new technologies in place. We have Salesforce and we have some cool Python libraries, but it's mostly the same, right? It's the same functions, the same jobs, right? I don't know. Maybe we have a cloud engineer now we didn't have in the past, but it's mostly the same. 5 years, let's say, I'll be more generous. 10 years from now, how companies work in the age of AI is fundamentally different. And so right now, everyone is a software 1.0 company. Doesn't matter if you're Abnormal or Oracle, you're a software 1.0 company, how you work and how you build product, how you run the business, and how you sell product. The way a company needs to work in 10 years is fundamentally different. Different org chart, different roles, different responsibilities, different business processes. There's things that are impossible to do last year that will be possible with AI. And if you're not thinking about what that transformation is, you're not on the leading edge of that, then you're on a dead end road. And so I would say it doesn't even matter how good your product strategy or your product or your executive team is. That's going to be the highest order bit. Like the best product, if you're a software company, the best product, the best team, the best relationship with customers, it won't matter in the future. When the cost of software engineering approaches 0, when the cost of sales, it cuts in half, or you turn that all into building 100 products, right? Getting to none of the current assets will matter quite as much. And so you have to make that transformation. If you don't make transformation, you will lose, just a matter of time. It depending on how much head start you have now. And so also like the defensive modes of software companies are going to fundamentally change. In 5 years from now, any company will have any product that can be generated with software. And so like we need to operate today as if our code base is already open source, right? And think about, that, all your competitors, they will have your exact code, right? So how are you going to win in that world, right? The defensive modes change. It's not about proprietary, code bases now. It's going to be things like customer trust, customer relationships, and unique data, right? Those are the new software modes, right? Pick a company, right? Within a year or two, we'll be able to effectively instantly replicate, all their code bases. Our deep research AIs will watch every frame of every video, every blog post, every insight, every link to profit organization will generate product documents, tech design documents, and all the code and all the processes and all the, internal G&A tools we use to run our business to perfectly replicate that. If all your competitors do that to your product, how do you win in the future?
Dario from Anthropic there, to his comment about the machines within a year can do what it was, the 90% of the engineering work for software. That's a pretty interesting, provocative statement. If it's true, what you're saying is more imminent than one would think.
Yeah. So I think that's true, but that's just like step one, right? Like what we're doing abnormal, we're doing, we record all, not all, but a lot of our customer conversations. We have deep research AI go through all those conversations. They find the bugs, the feature requests, they route them to the right engineers. We get ideas for new products. We harvest all that product feedback. We generate product requirements documents, right? Those then generate technical design documents, which pick the technologies and the architecture. It generates the visual UI mocks. That all feeds into, AI generated software. The testing and the QA and the code review is also done with AI, right? Not yet, but soon we'll be able to take all that, automate a lot of the marketing with AI. And that's like what we see in the 1 year horizon, right? So that transformation is very fast in R&D, but it's going to happen in G&A and, sales and marketing. And again, like you're either on the leading edge or the lagging edge of that transformation. And it's not, unlike past changes like the cloud, cloud's like 50% improvement, right? It's been transformative. We're already seeing, right, in March 2025, a 10x productivity improvement in software engineering. And that's this is the dumbest these AIs will ever be is today. And so it's going to get way crazier. So just like, do you want to be going down the highway in like an F1 car or a golf cart, right? Like it doesn't matter how far behind that F1 car is on the highway. If it's going 10x or 100x faster, it's going to, blow past the golf cart. And we're all in golf carts today. And, that's not the future.
This is amazing. Evan, thank you so much. So great to see you. And I will say, I am genuinely grateful to be in business with you. I consider you a dear friend. I wish I could clone you.
Me too.
And work with people like you every day. I just really appreciate you. And what you've shared with founders today, I hope they take that wisdom, absorb it, and execute on it. Because I do think that looking ahead, people will view Abnormal as a really game-changing, completely new type of company. I really believe, as you know, in every fiber of my body, that this company is going to be massive, not just like an interesting dent-making company, but a transformative company. I believe that for the first time I met you.
Yeah, and I think everyone's got playbooks that work from them. It's really important to understand what is it about that environment that made the playbook work. Some things work for us, not going to work from some other founder, but there are some just like first class things that are important, like partnership, first principles thinking, just like common sense stuff, right? And people get too spun up on all these what's the perfect go-to-market strategy playbook? But like, if you just stick with the core, like listen to customers, build stuff they like, help it sell it to them, ask common sense questions to things, don't second guess your instincts, have good intellectual honesty, be self-aware. Like there's some fundamental things which everyone can do. Right? I'm not the smartest person. I failed out of college, right? I didn't have the best work ethic. There's nothing really special about me other than I didn't underestimate the power of these kind of fundamental qualities. Every entrepreneur has the ability to do these things, right? It doesn't take some magical talent. So I think that there's nothing here, none of those core ideas, right, can't be replicated, right? They're relevant to every business. Our specific playbooks, right, maybe work, maybe don't work. But I think there's some things there that are timeless.
Absolutely right. Evan, thank you again for joining this podcast. And I will hopefully see you in person very soon, sir.
Looking forward to that. Excited for Evan Andy Part 2.
Me too, sir. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you.